All right, welcome back. If this is if you've been here to a HBCU Educate webinar before, if this is your first time, welcome. Glad that you are here, especially if you're here live. We do share the recordings of these webinars on the YouTube channel for NASPA Region 3. Before we get started with this webinar today, I just want to say that I'm extremely thankful for my time as the HBCU Division Chair, and as all good things must come to an end. My term will be done in March, and so this is the last webinar series for me, but it has been so exciting to connect with HBCU alum, professionals, and researchers to really just engage in the work that we do on our campuses, engage in the work that needs to be done on our campuses, and provide that as a source of professional development to current professionals in higher ed, whether they work at HBCU or not, whether they are alums, etc. I've been receiving a lot of great feedback from those that have been here on the live sessions and those that have seen the recording. So I'm really thankful for my opportunity to serve, but I'm still here, so we're gonna get it going. If you know me, you know I'm energetic. I like to talk, and today we're gonna talk some good talk, okay? So we're opening up this last webinar series with some alum of a particular HBCU. And so we're going to talk about this idea of cultural capital, but from the alumni voices, those that went to an HBCU. And so I have three colleagues here with me. One that haven't worked directly with per se, but we've been at the same institution. But one thing in common that they have is that they all are alum of Winston-Salem State University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I think it's what they call Ram Nation or Ram Pride. Is that what y'all call it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, a Ram thing.
I will hold my pride, my true pride, for the sake of professional spaces. But yes.
Definitely understand. And thank you for that. So I'm so glad that you all are here. So for us to get started, I have some questions for you all. We're going to dive into some dialogue. Those that are watching, if you have any comments, put those in the chat. If you have questions, put those in the Q&A section. And after we have this panel discussion, we're going to open up to some of the questions that you may have and get those addressed. And so let's get right into it. We want to know who you are. So let's go around and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about just your experience being a student, or when you were a student, if you can remember back then, when you were a student at Winston-Salem. And so we will start with Jeremy.
Awesome. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm excited to host space with you all this afternoon. Looking forward to a really great conversation. My name is Jeremy Lee. I'm a second year, PhD student at North Carolina State University in the Education, Leadership, Policy, Human Development PhD program with a concentration in higher education, opportunity, equity, and justice. And so excited to be here. I have been in the field now for about 4 or 5 years. Prior to my research area for the PhD program is mostly on Black and male students in higher education, recruitment, retention, masculinities, a number of things fall into that purview. Additionally, before this time in the program, I worked in student affairs. I was in Res Life for several years at several institutions, including NC State. I also worked with Black Male Initiative programs at NC State for several years and really enjoyed that work, and was really enjoyable because it gave me the opportunity to kind of live out some of the experiences that were provided to me in undergrad by several mentors, administrators at my HBCU, Winston-Salem State. Aside from that, I hold degrees as well from UNC Wilmington with a master's degree, and of course, as we're here now, my bachelor's degree from Winston. My time at Winston-Salem State, I'm a 2013 alumnus of the institution, along with Jerisha. We were next to each other at graduation. Go Rams. And so during that time at Winston, I was involved in a lot of different campus organizations. I was a member of everything from the pep squad to the gospel choir. I actually went to Winston-Salem State, initially majoring in music education. I wanted to be a chorus teacher. I did change my major into history with a minor in political science, and then took this path to higher education. So I always want to be an educator and was involved in spaces like that across the campus. Some of the philanthropic things, and also have been involved in Greek life. In my fraternity, Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia Fraternity of America Incorporated. So I do still kind of sing with the fraternity every now and then. It was a good time. So that's a bit about me. I'm excited to share more, and I'll turn it over now to someone else.
I'll go. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerisha Fair. I am a proud alumna of the Winston-Salem State University. Graduated 2013. I was a political science history major. So me and Jeremy was with each other basically 24/7 during our last two-part senior run at Winston-Salem State University. I was active as far as student activity-wise. I helped charter the Zeta Lambda chapter of Pi Sigma Epsilon Co-Ed Business Fraternity Incorporated, as well as I was a student worker and student volunteer, or what we like to call the third floor Thompson Center. I was a third floor baby in a Thompson Center, as well as being politically active within the Winston-Salem community through the tutelage of Larry Little. Helping me become more politically affiliated and savvy with how politics work, not just within on a local level, but within the state and national level. As well as that, I'm also a proud alumna of North Carolina A&T State University, where I earned my master's in adult education. And with there, I was working up under not direct supervision, but more like a parallel supervision with Dr. Kelly Dixon in housing residence life as a graduate assistant, where I was in the role as a graduate assistant with student conduct in the housing residence life division. And with that, I've had, a series of professional experiences at historically Black colleges and large PWIs, but I now serve as the director of cultural programming and Safe Zone at Fayetteville State University. And I'm also a fourth year doctoral student at Auburn University, where I'm writing, or dissertating as they like to say, and my dissertation focus is on adult learners who experience need-based insecurities and how it correlates with their academic engagement. And it's more so focused on adult learners who are enrolled at public HBCUs and minority serving institutions in the UNC system.
Okay, run the checks. Eric?
Yes, thank you again for having me here. Full disclosure, I am slightly nervous, and I'm never nervous in this type of situation. I am a proud non-traditional graduate of the Winston-Salem State University class of 2016. I initially attended in 2006. I also consider myself an alumnus of University of the District of Columbia, which is also an HBCU in Washington, D.C., my hometown. Like I said, I received my BA in sociology with a focus in social inequalities from Winston-Salem State. While at Winston-Salem State in my two separate tenures, I was involved with organizations such as Black Men for Change, Campus Activities Board, the Non-Traditional Adult Student Organization, which is a national organization for students who are above the age of 24 who are pursuing their bachelor's degrees. I was also involved in residence life. I worked on campus in multiple offices. I interned under the director of Greek life. And just really enjoyed my time. I'm also an alumnus of Georgetown University, where I received my master's in higher education administration in 2020. I've worked professionally for the last 5 years in higher education, mostly within advising, but I've also worked in residence life. I currently sit as an exploratory academic advisor at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, where I work diligently with students who were similar to myself, who attended school, knew they needed to go to college, but had no idea why or what they were working towards, kind of helping them clear the waters towards path to graduation. And I am very, very happy to be here.
Awesome. So as you can see, I have a panel full of experts when it comes to the experiences of HBCUs and then the experience of working in higher ed, which leads me to my first question. When you think about the nature of higher ed in general, and your experiences at a HBCU, how has that helped you or assisted you in your transition to wanting to currently now work within higher ed? No particular order.
I'll jump.
Okay. Okay.
I'll jump in. I'm gonna say it before everybody else can say it. I think the three of us, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think the three of us really embodied what our school motto was, and this enter to learn, depart to serve. And you hear it over and over again when you first get there, but I think you literally learn what that means even as you become a professional. And working in higher education, there are certain opportunities that we gained while we were on campus that we may not have thought that this was a path for our career. We may have thought we wanted education or something along those lines, but as far as working at a college campus and to really give back or to look and see, these are people that helped me in my path towards getting where I am and seeing the importance of reaching back and pulling as we're climbing ourselves. So I think that's kind of ingrained into the culture of HBCUs inherently. I think that many of us have a close connection to not only the people, but the experience, but this the things that you just kind of feel, which kind of goes back to kind of cultural capital, and things that you learn from there, where you see the importance of people working in those environments that truly care about those environments. Higher education overall, but also with very particular student bodies that reflect people that look like us.
Yeah, and you said something really big, taking that wisdom, and taking it with you and others as you climb. And that reminded me of the concept of Sankofa. Jerisha.
To be honest, I wanted students to have a similar experience as I had during my time at Winston and particularly A&T. And I say that because I am from Hickory, North Carolina, which is a mid-sized city at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains that is rural in a sense, categorical wise is rural. And coming from that part of the state, which you don't see a lot of Black people in the high country or mountains of the Appalachians, and then coming to a more urban metropolitan area, and you see all these Black individuals on this campus, and they come from all walks of life. It's just like you are stunned and wanting to exude, demonstrate my experience that we're not all the same, but however, we're here for the common good, which is to become educated and to go off and do great things with what we learned from this institution. And so, of course, having that Sankofa moment, but also charging others, our peers, to go out and do good as well. Of course, those behind us are always going to be good because, like Eric said, it's instilled in us to reach back, no matter if it's intentional or unintentional. We always end up crossing paths, no matter what HBCU you come from. There's always that reach back factor. But what we don't discuss about is the challenging support of our peers. And I'm pretty sure Eric and Jeremy can attest to you. I call them probably on a bi-monthly or monthly basis and remind them, hey, did you do this? I'm just checking in. Did we complete this? I need to know where we are. Do you need my support? What do you need from me? Or how can I reach out to my sources or touch base with my sources I've created to ensure that you are successful in their endeavor, in their specific endeavors.
I'll chime in as well. So I would say that one thing I value about my time at Winston-Salem State were life lessons that were learned in all pockets and facets of the campus space. For me, I really honored the fact that anyone could be a mentor or just drop some kind of nuggets on you, whether it was a professor or whether it was Mr. Mitchell up in Greek Life or the man at the Ramshack who sold you your quesadilla. Like, everyone could drop some gems on you that could really help you, become a better person and better in life. And that type of family, that type of kinship, that kind of like sacred, like, gathering of folks who like us, is something that is just really, that speaks to the culture of just, for me, not just the culture of family, but also the idea of service. We're all giving back to one another and trying to make sure we continue to uplift our race, uplift ourselves as people. And I take that spirit with me in every space I go into in higher education, whether that's spaces, that are not built with me in mind, or whether that's just in the spaces I've tried to author or self-author and co-create within my residence hall space for students. I take with me those folks who really want to drop great wisdoms and great tutelage to us when needed at the most. And so when I think about, my journey in higher education, how Winston really informed that, it's the family, it's the Ram fam at its heart, whether that's someone who's been in the classes with me or like a 1985 alumnus, whatever it's going to be. Like, I know that like Ram family is good family, and I try to carry that spirit with me in every space I go into in higher education.
Yeah. And so all of you have talked about this, this family, the service, this idea of giving back, what has been given to you, which really ties into what family and service is about. And so when you think about where you are now, and though you don't know where you're going to be 5 years from now, but you think about some of the things you want to do in the HBCU space to uplift, to assist with the sustainability of these institutions. Can you talk to me about what are some things that you're currently doing? I know two of you have mentioned you're working on doctorate degrees, but what are some things that you're currently doing that you do because you are an alum of Winston-Salem State University, but also an alum of an HBCU?
And I don't mean to, just not professional shade, but like shun. But I know for me, it was when I went back, I was like, I want to create a food pantry. Because my first 2 years at Winston was a struggle for me, in regards to having the adequate resources to have a sustainable learning experience. And that's no pun or no shade towards the university, because at the time our school was growing, literally expanding. And leadership was trying to get a understanding on how to retain us. And part of the problem was that they were bringing in students who identified as me, but not having the adequate resources.
Right.
And so that means we're coming to school, but we don't have enough of money to eat. We're coming to school, but that last 20 went towards gas trying to get to campus. Like, am I going to spend this last 20 on groceries that last me for the next week or two? Or am I going to spend it to get me to class for the remainder of the week so I won't, get dropped or get an F in class? And so speaking and having peers that was experiencing the same thing, to the point where, and Jeremy from Miami sharing this, where it was when me and Jeremy was in summer school together, summer 2010, we will literally bring together all of our resources, monetary resources, so that for that full 10 weeks, we will have food to eat, and we will call them cook-ins. And so knowing that we established this rapport with each other because we know graduation was the goal, we also knew during that summertime, that was a time for us to work because of the households we came from, and having to sacrifice, earning that extra $3,000 over the summer as opposed to earning these extra 9 credits so we can graduate on time or a year late. We had to pull together our financial resources and call on our mamas and grandmas to, send us an extra 20, just to last us. And so when I came back during my graduate year, my last graduate, to fulfill my practicum requirement, I sat down with Dr. Loriano and Deanna Carrington Summers and was like, how can we make this possible? And so they sat down with me, they mapped out who I need to talk to. They helped me draw and flesh out ideas and planning and everything, and to the point where within week 8 of my practicum, when I think it's Cornell Graves or Williams, who's over VP Relations, government relations for Winston, was like, this needs bigger support. And that's when Del Hayes Foods or Food Line came in and was like, hey, we're starting this initiative to address this growing silent trend that's happening across the country of food insecurity. And they put me in front, Dr. Loriano and Dr. Carrington Summers put me in front of the Del Hayes people. They just said, do you? And it was in the corner. And after I showed the results of students in dire need of food that's experiencing food insecurity, Food Line was like, okay, when can we come build the food pantry?
Wow.
At the end of the meeting. And I looked back at them and I was like, I'm not over facilities, but if you can give us a week, we can get you an answer. And so coming back and establishing that, and the fact that it's still operable to today is something that I'm proud of, that I helped establish at my institution, but also it essentially became my expertise, or what I want to be an expert in, which is need-based insecurity. And so having developed that aspect and having those people behind me is to the fact that I want to now give more to my alma mater, my undergrad alma mater, but now I'm just like, what can I do? How can I position myself? And so now I've become active with the Young Alumni Council, affectionately known as YAC, and sitting with the two committee chairs and just possibly hammering out ideas or thinking about ideas on how to get more engagement for young alum like myself, who have been to all these places and gained all this knowledge, to bring it back to the institution.
Awesome. Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
I can go next. So I will say I wish I could do more. I will say I want to do more. So for me, the first thing I do is support my institution. I do give back regularly. I highly encourage any alum of an HBCU to give back, of any school to give back in some regard. I do also try myself present in conversations around the longevity of our institution and the issues that are happening in our institution. I do try to recognize that I do host a space as a higher ed administrator, where I understand the workings and the interwoven pieces of systems in higher education, so I can understand those things and know how to communicate those to alumni and to peers and colleagues at the institution when needed, and hopefully kind of sit in waiting until I'm asked to be utilized more often. Additionally, I do give back by working with some mentoring some younger alumni, particularly around the younger students, particularly around the fine arts department. I still go back regularly with my fraternity and still work with some undergraduate students there. But I do hope to still find myself to be utilized more. I do feel, in my professional opinion and personal opinion, that Winston State has a wealth of resources in their alumni that they're not often tapping into as well as they could. I hope to one of those they tap into soon. Tap me, oh Lord. But nevertheless, I will hope to be utilized more in the future. So yeah.
Don't get oily on here now.
I don't mind. I take it every now and then.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I too wish I could do more. I have been involved in a lot of things with fellow alumni such as myself. So I'm one of the people that I'll support. I'll do the best I can to support any initiatives that I've had, classmates I've had going on. One such being, it's a lobbying and advocacy group called HBCU Collective that brought HBCU students, not just from Central State, but from other institutions in North Carolina to Capitol Hill, taught them about the lobbying process, taught them how to advocate on behalf of their historically Black colleges and universities in front of their own elected officials. There was an HBCU Day of Action where we've literally had these students, some being SGA members of Winston State and other institutions, who have turned around and are now interning on Capitol Hill. Putting them in those rooms, helping them get those resources and that acknowledgement of what they're really wanting to do, but also building those connections. Addition to that, giving back, that goes without saying, But one thing that I do find very important is somewhat like the kind of ad hoc type conversations that you may have with other alumni, putting them on game, to use a regularly used euphemism, right? There are certain opportunities that we just don't know that are out there while we were students that we don't learn after the fact. I will tell anybody who owns the sound of my voice, I did not pay for my graduate degree. How did I not pay for my graduate degree? I found a job at an institution. I paid attention to the benefits. I listened to everybody who was around me that was spreading this information, and I took advantage. And I spread that. I was like, this is what you need to look for. If you're trying to figure out what you're looking to do, after you graduate, find a way to kind of combine that with a place that's heavy in resources. Some colleges may not be able to pay the same way others ones will, but those benefits can be great. Those little small things I share with a myriad of people. I think personally, the work that I do is even at a PWI, MSI, if you will, it is always with the intention and the thought process of the student that I was and the students who are similar to myself. I nearly failed out of Winston-Salem State. And I say that because if I did not do that, I don't get to where I am. I have this very concerned effort right now with everything I'm doing when I talk about Black students across the country who somewhat feel the need to pick a major based upon what money it will lead to and not determine what their choice is and how they're creating meaning making outside of potential of profit alone. When I do get to the stages as my co-panelists here, when they start, searching for PhDs eventually, one thing I do care about is meaning making and showing students that look like us, you have opportunities to be successful everywhere. Chasing the dollar doesn't necessarily mean chasing the dream. So I think it inherently influences everything that I do, and then influences how I communicate with the students who are still currently there, who are recently graduating now.
So I want to reiterate this common theme of HBCUs and service and commitment to service while you are attending and even as alum of institutions. And so I want to think from a broader perspective of HBCUs as a whole. When you think about our commitment to serve, you think about the nature of how we have existed in higher ed, right? Let's give notice to that, 1837. Cheney University being the first, but it wasn't until 1965 that HBCUs were considered places of higher learning. So, someone out there do the math. And here we are, 2022, and some of the things that we were facing in 1837, unfortunately, we're still facing today, right? So, you think about, students, predominantly Black students that attend our institutions, some of them are chasing the money because mom, dad, whoever, auntie, granny said you should be an engineer. So because they make a lot of money, do that, they get here and they realize I don't like math and I don't want to do math. So engineering may not work for me. And what does that really mean? So thank you, Eric, for bringing that concept up. So now I want to move into talking about this whole idea of reality versus perception when it comes to HBCUs. Not only just attending, but as alum, you hear a lot of things, and a lot of things you don't hear, and whether you work on an HBCU campus or not. And so when you think about perception versus reality, what are some aha moments of things that come to mind around this whole concept of not only the relevance, but the sustainability of HBCUs and the issues that we're having, challenges, and how we can kind of find some common ground to correct them?
To be honest, racism is real. We knew racism was real when we were attending HBCUs. Like, we studied it. We knew how to call it out, during, Jim Crow and chattel slavery. But when you look at the funding structures of HBCUs, whether they're private or public, it's blatantly racism. And it's due to how our society, how capitalism is set up. The fact that, the numbers out there are not lying. We produce, and I say we, HBCUs produce the most, Black graduates or Black bachelor degree holders and terminal degree holders, but yet we still receive lack of funding and lack of financial structural support when it comes to, you know, providing more cushion for these students. But also, one thing I wish that I would have known coming out was that it was some type of pipeline for HBCU students who are interested in going into higher ed to better equip us as far as like institutional knowledge and know-how, or the ins and outs of higher ed um, and how whitewashed it can be, and not getting lost in the gaze or proximity of whiteness, but also um, having that camaraderie or that extra piece of cultural capital from other HBCU alum who are pursuing the same route as you, and creating like a external resource group, so that it creates this form of resistance, or fictive kinships throughout the sectors of higher ed. I see that growing now because we see a good number of us going out into the field. But I think when me, Jeremy, and Eric came into, it's just like we had to do everything on our own, figure out things on our own. And I don't know if those who influenced us to go into this field were like doing parental, I want to say like being parents to us, trying to shield us, but letting us go out and learn on our own. But I want to say we learned some things. Some things we're gonna have to take to the grave because we're like, nah, we can't share that. Or some things we're gonna be like, oh, we're gonna have to share that, no matter who feelings we hurt or who toes we step on. Because at the end of the day, it's about ensuring that our institution is here another 150 years from now.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm gonna come back to some of those things you said, but Eric, Jeremy, did you want to contribute?
Sure. I hate politics, right?
Okay, just say it.
Right? I hate politics. I can't help it, but everything that I do is intrinsically impacted or completely revolves around politics, whether that mean within my own individual sector of the school I work in, whether that means dealing with how something that I want to do impacts something that's a state mandate, peer-to-peer politics, there's certain things that I didn't understand that it changed my perception of who I thought was for me as a student versus who I now know was really for me as a administrator.
Wow.
And because it's kind, and to a degree, kind of jumping back to what Jerisha said, it is somewhat like that parent situation, right? Where you may not like your parents all the time, but they're doing something that is it's the best thing for you, even if it doesn't necessarily feel good. I could look back and I appreciate a lot of people a lot more on this side of working than I ever appreciated as a student. I'm gonna shout his name out because he was hard on me, but there were certain things that he instilled in me that I cannot help but always think about. Oh, I hear his voice in my head, Dr. Larry Felder, and everybody knows who Dr. Larry Felder is. My Lord. I could not cut it as one of his students in this major. I realized it's not what I wanted to do, but there was a certain work ethic that came there. Oh, you want to be a sports management major? Great. When the football game's going on, you out here selling these programs. During the game, I'm trying to be in the stands and having fun. He's like, no, you out here selling these programs because you got to go to work. He's like, oh, you want to get advised? Okay, you got to beat me in my office at 4:30 in the morning because when you go out there and get these go into these fields with people who don't look like you, that have better named, not better quality, but better named degrees, they're going to get into that meeting a half hour early. You got to be there an hour early waiting. And it's just a certain level of work ethic where you just kind of have to go after it, where yeah, you get it from home, but it's different when somebody's putting on you and they don't have to have that care about you. Right. So I will say that that's one of those things where, you know, you can't overlook it. But yeah, I'll just say that, like, on this side, I think it's also important, and I think, you know, Jerisha probably knows this well, so is Jeremy. As those of us who now work in higher education, we're now somewhat as like fact checkers and gatekeepers for those of us who went to school with us, who have opinions about, oh, the school's doing this, is this not right, or this is right? And we're like, well, listen, this is objectively what it is. Right. And it's important that we have some level setting of what it is if we're going to give our institution some grace, but also hold them properly accountable.
Yes, we'll come back to that too.
I love all of that. I do. I'll also add another point too. I think for me, I reflect a lot on the administrators at Winston and what it took to create the experience we had there. So if you were at Winston in my day, Thompson 305, 304 was where you hung out. Those were offices for administrators, but the rest were like clubs. Like, you went there. I don't know an hour that, like, in a day that, like, Shalee, these are administrators, Mitchell, or, you know, Miss Heather Davis, like, these folks didn't have someone in their office at some point in a day. You were just there. Shalee's only rule was that you just had to go make sure she had food, and she used your swipes and got food. Like, and we go in there and talk, you know, it was me there all the time. So I met a lot of these people on the influence that in those spaces. And so I never really thought about what it took to hold space for students like that until I became an administrator with Black and male students at NC State, where my office door was open like theirs was when I was an undergrad. And I realized it's a lot of work to have students in your office all the time. Personally, for me, I have ADHD. I disclose that publicly to say that if you come to my office and say hello to me, my attention is immediately taken away from everything else. It's focused on you. And so I think about now just how much work it took for them to be these mothers and other mothers for students in the way that they did, and not just during business hours, you know, well after 5 o'clock, well after things, Saturdays, Sundays, you name it. So, like, they were always there. And so now, as an administrator, I recognize the time they took there, right? Well, I also have access to databases and services to tell me, you know, how much folks make in their paychecks at Winston State compared to, you know, whatever. And I'm like, they're grossly underpaid for their services they provide to us. Grossly underpaid. And I'm like, also, I look at data around, you know, UNC system engagement for employees. I'm like, they're also grossly underappreciated for what they provide to us as well. And so as an administrator now, I look and say, Winston State owes so much more to its administrators who are out in those spaces, especially those folks who, you know, are alum, have a deep connection to students, those folks who just really sacrifice all their time. I think even for folks who maybe they did to the HBCU and came to Winston State and learned that culture was a thing there and then gave up their time to us. I think those folks are grossly underappreciated and under-resourced and underutilized in their spaces. I think, moreover, those administrators who have real great innovative ideas of how to really propel our institutions forward and oftentimes not heard by administrators because of, Eric said, politics. These folks know how to make our institutions be successful. These folks know what the students really need because they're around them all the time. But until administrations higher up begin to listen to the voices of those administrators, you'll find that we're still in these stagnant spaces in our institutions. And so I don't like politics. I'm a very straight shooter. I'm gonna tell you what I feel, if y'all can't tell that by now. But I do recognize that, like, if we give back those policies to get to the business of people, we'll actually start to learn that there's a lot of really wonderful gems in those spaces that can really help to advance all of our institutions forward.
Awesome. So you all have hit on a lot of topics that not only relate to HBCUs, but higher ed in general, but we're going to keep it at HBCUs, that I have written about or looking to write about or having conversations about with colleagues in the HBCU space. And when I say that, meaning that they don't necessarily work in the HBCU, but they advocate for HBCUs, do research around HBCUs. So I want to throw a quick plug to Virginia Union University, where we have our first ever center for the study of HBCUs under the direction of Dr. Terrell Strayhorn. Also want to throw another plug, because you all mentioned a lot of things, so I'm trying to hit everybody. When it comes to professional development as it relates to transitioning individuals, especially those students from HBCUs who want to work in higher ed. I'm gonna stay there really quick. That's the purpose of this webinar series. As someone who only went to predominantly white institutions, but the mass majority of my higher ed career has been at a HBCU, North Carolina A&T State University, I have seen, and I have seen, attending conferences where I'm typically the only HBCU professional, yet I have HBCU alum around me. Right. And so it has been, and it still is, my desire to really have more conversations and action-oriented strategies to instill not only in our undergrads at HBCUs, but also young professionals, whether they're pursuing a graduate degree, doctoral degree, that want to go into higher education, but also want to work at HBCUs, what that looks like. And that this whole conversation of reality and perception is key. Because you do have the other mothering, that's a big thing, especially for Black women, being those other mothers to Black students, brown students alike. And it takes space, time, energy, mental health, everything, right? Because you recognize that if I don't, and I'm speaking for myself, if I don't have this conversation with this student in this moment, because they walked all across from the Student Health Center to Murphy Hall. If you've been to A&T's campus, it's a pretty good walk. To have a conversation with me, if I don't take the time to have it, one, I know no one else will. And two, I don't know what may happen if I don't. And when COVID came, I saw that. Students were emailing me saying, oh man, I can't come to your office right before class. Now I don't want to go to class, but it's virtual. They talked about missing the space of just having conversation. And it wasn't about academics, but it was about life, preparing them for what is life for me as a student, as a Black student, leaving an HBCU, going into the workplace. And most of these students were going to workplaces where the people did not look like them. And what does that look like? And so that other mothering is essential, the professional development, the politics, systemic racism, systemic oppression, and how that has impacted HBCUs. At one point, and probably to some people, the question still arises, are they relevant? Yes, more so than ever. I think the question now from an assessment point of view is, are we truly valuing? So going back to Jerisha, just talking about your experience in terms of food insecurities, and need-based insecurities, are we really doing the proper assessment of our students to understand what it is that they need to succeed, flourish? And a lot of times they will not tell us because they don't want to be the odd person out. They don't know how to tell. For some that are Black, come from Black homes, that say what happens in this house stays in this house type of mentalities. We got to disrupt a lot of this. I do believe that HBCU alum in general, but those particularly that work in higher ed have a platform and opportunity to disrupt narrative, to really reinforce, going back to the underpaid, because we all can earn a little bit more money, going back to understanding the nature of education for students of color, particularly Black students at HBCUs, and what that really takes. Has to go beyond just the politics of what we do. So thank you all for sharing all of that. I already got some things in my head that I'm going to get you all doing, so just be mindful. But I want to thank you because I also want to give time for people that are watching live to ask any questions or comments that they may have. And so I will say, if you are watching live, if you can put those questions or comments in the Q&A section or even in the chat section so we can get those to the panelists. But as we're waiting for those questions and comments to come in, when you think about higher ed today, in the midst of COVID, the pandemic, in the midst of what we all know has always been here, but racial injustice uptick, what has been going on in society, and then also mental health and mental illness around BIPOC, more particularly Black students, faculty, and staff. When you think about all of that, how important, I know this is kind of like a loaded question, But from your perspective, how important is it for us to have higher ed professionals that come from HBCUs? How important is that?
Okay.
Okay, he didn't. Okay, I'm gonna sit back.
So this is, as you said, this is a lot, right? We already know, and I'm saying we already know, not as in you can go and research this or look this up inside of a book or a journal or anything like that, but those of us who have worked in higher education, who are familiar with HBCUs, and even if you didn't necessarily attend, we have seen for the last 10 years or so, at least, an uptick in the amount of methods, tools, concepts,
Strategies.
That have been birthed or just organically created on historically Black college campuses being copied by our PWI counterparts, right? So it's like it's a double-edged sword, because yes, people who are coming from HBCUs who want to work in higher ed, who, they get the degrees and everything like that, they're getting hired. We're getting hired. Don't get it twisted. We're sought out, but we're being sought out in some ways that could possibly create cultures to pull students away from our institutions. And I think it's important that we start there, right? Because the history of our institutions is that we do more with less, and we have been doing more with less forever. And it's recognized. So what happens if you allow those who are doing more with those same strategies, tools, cultural norms, et cetera, do that at a place where they are receiving funding? And so I say that to say it is very important, because I think that more than the PWIs that I've worked at, HBCUs really care about holistic learning in an active way, as opposed to a way that you can put in a marketing scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that is something that you just learn through experience, and you learn how to now flip it and give it to someone else so that they get that same experience. And you're not just learning within the classroom, but you're learning about life. You're learning the skills. You're learning how to network. You learn the importance of holding the spot for somebody behind you in the ramshack line because they had to go get their ram car from their roommate. Like, you learn all those little small things that the cultural capital, you learn that. The thing is that, do our schools, one, trust those who came from those schools to help push us forward, right? And two, will the powers that be see the importance of increased funding to make what they say they do match what actually takes place? And I put that in perspective of one of the institutions I worked at told me that we have no money, and their endowment was and this was years ago, it was like 4 years ago, their endowment was about 500 million larger than the largest HBCU endowment. So when you put it in perspective of a school saying, we ain't got no money to do anything, and they literally have more money than the most endowed HBCU, what does that enable our HBCUs to do as far as going to get those of us who want to work there, but who also deserve to be recognized and funded and developed the way that we deserve? So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I want to jump on to what you just said, actually. I love that point. one thing you mentioned that I really loved was like the idea about pulling students away from the HBCU, and I thought a lot about my experience working at my current institution, NC State. Thinking about how, for me in Red's life, particularly the Red Zone I oversaw was the space where Black students had been like coming together for years, like since the 90s, have been a space they just had dwelled in. And much of why the Black mentorship was housed there. And so I'm now a director of this community. And so like throughout the year, we were playing programs and events, and I was essentially just creating the culture I knew everyone sound say in this community. So everything from our spring, we had a spring cookout every year. The Asian cookout was also a big deal. And so, you know, it's like this event where all these like Black students are coming, and all these students are looking at how wonderful it's been in the space to see somebody who look like them at this very large STEM institution where they may see a Black person in class once in a blue moon, right? And so now they see all these folks across their campus spaces here. And I'm thinking to myself, man, what if I took these same experiences and took them back to my Black college? Because essentially I'm creating a sense of belonging at NC State that I could be creating at Winston-Salem State or at Fayetteville State or another state. So like for me, I kind of sit with that. Well, as Eric mentioned, like it's almost a sense of guilt at times of like, hey, I love HBCUs. I am from HBCU, and I really want to pour back into my HBCUs. And I feel like I'm robbing the culture for what I know about creating that again in these white spaces. I kind of struggle with that at times because there was some really dope things happen in those times. I can see them being very helpful in other spaces. But to your question, I mean, I think it's very needed for those reasons. I think there's a type of cultural, we say, when we're using the term of cultural capital, there's a lot of cultural understanding we recognize how we build community, how we build family, not just among students, but also amongst administration peers. We build that type of connection and things that will empower folks to continue to do their work in a way. And so I do recognize that there's an importance of having folks like us represent in these spaces. And I'll be very interested in seeing in the coming years, we have, you know, a large growing number of higher ed programs starting up at HBCUs nowadays. I think almost a good number of HBCUs North Carolina have higher ed similar like programs now, and I'll see that kind of expand across, you know, other institutions. So I'll be interested in seeing as those professionals go out there into the field what that looks like as they start kind of telling their stories. One more point to make: we're gonna write a publication about the Ramshack and lessons learned. If y'all not caught it, we're gonna write it because we've all said it at this point. Just want to mention that.
Thank you for that.
So I'm seeing things from a different angle. I currently work at HBCU. My last 4.5 years have been at large PWIs, respectfully Auburn University and Appalachian State. And you know, transitioning back to this side of home has been very difficult for me because I was with students who were literally fighting to be heard and seen all the time, as opposed to now I'm at an institution where it's just like what Eric said, the doing a lot of things on so little, producing a lot of things on so little. And how can we progress from that type of mentality or tradition as HBCUs? I don't know if you're familiar with the UNC system, but there is something called the NC Promise Act, where basically it aims and targets at certain institutions who are in rural areas or having a hard time with enrollment. And one of those schools that just came on was a school I'm with, which is Fayetteville State University. Now, granted, where we are in a part of North Carolina is eastern North Carolina, a little bit closer to the coast. And so we recruit more from the eastern side of North Carolina, which is very rural. However, within that plan, it's $500 a semester for tuition. And so, of course, the state gives like $160 million up front to the school, but when you have that knowledge and concept of how budgets and finances work for a higher institution, of that one that's supposed to grow, you know that, okay, there can be some pros and cons to this. And how does it affect not just the business of the university, but the overall students and the caliber and quality of services that we're giving to the students. And so trying to go back into this mentality of doing a lot with less, being that at my last 2 institutions, they were literally throwing money at my office trying to keep Black kids, Black and brown kids on campus, and programming that was geared towards them. And because of so much that has happened during COVID-19 and the civil and racial unrest, Black students were checked out at these PWIs, as opposed to here on Fayetteville campus. I have students hitting the ground running when we went back face to face in August. And granted, we modify some things now for the spring semester, but students have came back and like, Miss Fair, what can we do to do this and what can we do to do that? We know the funds are not there, but there is a way to make a way. And so, having that type of persistence and resilience, even though I don't like using resilience, to the fact of notion of that they know things can get done, a way just has to be made. If you give them an inch, they're gonna take it a mile. And so that is what I'm starting to notice, but also having HBCUs tap into the adult learner market. And with my institution, we have the largest enrolled adult learners in the Southeast region and out of all HBCUs. And so having to play on that and how we can serve them, because they're not your typical college age 18 to 22 individuals who have the experiences. They come in as veterans, active military, mothers, fathers, those who are coming back to finish their degrees. That is something that that I think HBCU should take an account for when trying to get an understanding of who they're serving, how to assess them, but also recognize in the sense that we're not like a one size fit all. We are a very fragile ecosystem when it comes to the HBCU world, in that the finances and the programming, there's no black and white. There's a lot of gray area on who can hit and miss with it. And so wanting HBCUs to understand that we can't always follow what our neighboring PWIs or other MSIs are doing, because we service different student demographics and populations and communities.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes, and I don't see any questions, but I am just thankful for your transparency. I'm thankful for the conversation, the stories that you have provided as it relates to your experience as students at Winston-Salem State University, and now how that has transformed into you being higher ed professionals in the space. I want to validate you. I want to support you. I am so excited for the things that you will do and how you are truly utilizing the transferable skills from your undergrad experience to now, in whatever capacity that you're looking to Jeremy and Jerisha, as you continue forth in the PhD, the doc journey, and Eric, if you find your way taking a detour to it, we welcome you. Because there's much to do in the HBCU space, not just working as professionals, but we need to write. Our voices need to be heard. I am a component of ensuring that HBCU voices are at the table, especially in the non-academic space, student affairs spaces, but we need to write. You all have provided a lot of information, a lot of tips, strategies, and just topics that we need to continue to have. And so as I close, I also want to plug in another space that has been near and dear to me. It's the Higher Education Leadership Foundation Health, which is designated for HBCUs. We come together from HBCU presidents to senior level to mid-level professionals at HBCUs, those that research HBCUs, alum. And so definitely want to highlight and give much respect to Health, the Higher Education Leadership Foundation, for the work that they are doing to transform HBCUs, as we have some of the conversations that we have brought up today. Also want to thank those that have attended the live session. Thank those that are watching the recording of the session. Is there anything else that you want to say in regards to cultural capital and you being an alum of an HBCU before we get out of here?
One last thing, because I attended Winston-Salem State and North Carolina A&T, it's motivated me to be a literal lifelong learner. My thing was like, how many degrees are you going to get? I don't understand. And having that spark in me to always ask questions and things. Like when I'm done with this, Eric and Jeremy was like, so what you gonna do after you finish? And I was like, to be honest, I want to take 2 years off and go back to school and get my JD. And they look at me like, huh? And I'm just like,
looking at you like, huh, too.
yeah. And I'm just like, I was like, because of our experiences at Winston, I want to become that change agent and going off and, of course, getting this education. It also has equipped me with, I don't have to pay for it. It has exposed me to resources that could pay for this. Even if it's partial payment, I like Denzel said, I'm coming out with something. So, it's made me become a lifelong learner, and I want this feeling to be for every Black and brown student, because learning just doesn't stop at college. It literally continues after you walk across that stage and get your diploma.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any last? We good? All right. Well, thank you once again. Thank you, Jerisha, Jeremy, and Eric, for just being transparent once again. And if you all that are watching, we have their bios up on the website, so feel free to check out their bios, their contact information if you feel the need to contact them after viewing this recording. But thank you again. Can't thank you enough for kicking off my last webinar series. But this will not be the end. So thank you all and have a great day.